Hey there, everybody. Welcome to episode 47 of the Adam Makes Beer Livestream Q&A podcast. My name's Adam. Hope your day's going well. It's a noon on a Friday, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you keeping score at home, we'll see how the noon live stream goes. How many of you are able to tune in while you're wrapping up your lauter, while you're crunching those numbers? Is there anybody out there crunching numbers? We're here for you there too. You know what I mean? It's been a busy week. Things have been going well. We're going to dip into it all today. If you are in the chat, please go ahead and let me know if my audio and video are fine. I always ask. It always is. I don't ask when I do the interviews, and it always seems to go just fine, even without confirmation. But let's dip in to it. Hey, if you're new to Adam Makes Beer over on the YouTube channel, make sure to go over there and click the playlist tab. The playlist tab has all the things you could ever want or desire. Full brew days, how I wash tanks, SOP stuff, good timing, high-fiving. Do you want it? I've got it on there. Get in there, dig in, click around. Okay? You won't regret it. Also, this is, we got Bobby in the chat. Welcome, Bobby. Hailing from an area north of me. Hopefully the winter weather is treating you better than it is me. It's not oppressively winter here, but I've also had enough of it. I have found that January and February is where things go wrong for me from a weight gain perspective. I just don't move. I don't go outside. And this is the first year we've actually had winter here since I've been living in the greater Cincinnati area. So I'm ready for some sunshine, ladies and gentlemen. I'm ready for some sunshine. For those of you that don't know, content creation, doing stuff like this is now my full-time gig, bringing you all educational brewing content. So if you are getting value and have the means, please consider a channel membership for less than a cup of coffee a month. That would do a whole lot to help me out, and we'll have some other things in there. Shout out to all the wonderful channel members out there. We had some new ones the past couple months. I really appreciate it. You all help to keep the lights on here. Also, a big note for a very free way to support the work that I'm doing. I'm doing a bunch of growing on Instagram. We'll dig into that a little bit more later. But doing specifically sharing and saving those reels and different things that I'm putting up on Instagram really speaks to the algorithm there. So it's a really simple, easy way. Liking, commenting is great too, but specifically sharing, hitting the little paper airplane and shipping that off either to your story or to some friends of yours. That is one of the main ways that algorithm helps to boost me up. So I appreciate it. Also, if you're in need of my consultation services, please reach out to me. You can hit me up on both my Instagram and my LinkedIn, and they both have a copy of my one-pager on there that discusses the services that I offer. All right. So if you're looking for somebody to come in and do kind of a cool, unique behind-the-scenes brew day video, cut it up into shorts, get it on Instagram, blast it out there. I know one of the last places that I did that with, they got, the regular roughly hour-long brew day YouTube video, and then really 20 to 30 short videos that end up going out over Instagram or YouTube. And that stuff alone, without really having a lot of collaboration with the brewery as far as sharing it, doing collab posts with me, that stuff is going to get pretty easily 150 to 200,000 views. So check it out. It would be potentially an interesting way that you can help get your brand out there. Speaking of brands, there's a couple that have been helping me carry the water now for a while. Starting a brewery is a big step. Blickman Engineering is here to help. Since 2006, they've equipped hundreds of nano breweries for success. Their new 3.5 barrel Pro Surface electric brewing system cuts maintenance and saves at least 30 minutes per brew day with powerful under kettle heating. From 1 to 15 barrel brew houses to keg washers and grain mills, Blickman has what you need. Ready to go pro? Contact Phil or Tom at proseries@blickmanengineering.com. Blickman is a proud sponsor of this channel and loves to help brewers at every stage of their journey. Tracking and managing the financial health of your brewery is a primary pillar of success. Check out my boy David Lentz at Brewed Fiscally. This man has the industry experience and skills you need so you can focus on growing your business. Bookkeeping, fractional CFO support, financial management system design, business plan review, hit up your boy. Check him out at brewedfiscally.com or shoot him an email at david@brewedfiscally.com. He's good people. Ladies and gentlemen, I got my hat's hitting the mic. I got a compliment on one of my most recent podcasts just 2 days ago. I was live with the esteemed John Haggerty of Warped Wing in Dayton and other locations. Check it out if you haven't already. And after I did my live read, he said that I could have a career in, the voice industry, because apparently the voice industry probably isn't the word, right? Probably isn't the word, but it made me feel good about myself, man. I always wonder if the podcast voice is actually like your voice. So, feel pretty good about it. But listen, you're not here to hear me ramble about my voice, about my pipes, my silky, slightly bassy. Bro, you catch me in the morning, you better be ready for some smooth jazz. Okay? Ask Andy Gallagher about it. Heal up, baby. Get good. Get out there moving. Okay? Andy's my man. We used to work together. And he used to talk to me about my smooth jazz voice in the morning. Drop down a little bit. I don't want to say that it made him feel feelings, but I'm also not going to not put words in his mouth. You know what I mean? I think if he's saying it, if he's putting it out into the ether like that, maybe he's experiencing something. You know what I mean? Sometimes things move within you, and I don't blame him. Adam Makes Beer News. I did not Q&A live last month. Why? Because I was busy, baby. I was dropping those weekly podcasts, son. I was out there doing my thing. Very busy with that. It was great. But I realized after I had scheduled all that stuff out, I did not get a Q&A in. And I had a little bit of a backlog of stuff. And so I figured, let's fire it up. So speaking of which, I see some of you that are viewing right now. I would love for you to drop any questions that you have in the chat, because I do have some stuff, but I don't have a ton. My focus has really been on cranking out this content and figuring out what I'm doing on these different platforms. We'll dip more into that later. But how about some conference news, ladies and gentlemen? We have two to talk about. One, OCBA conference. Your man was up there. Me and David, Lentz, Brewed Fiscally, sharing a booth. Just a couple of young pups out there. You know what I mean? Getting the word out about our businesses. You want a brewery consultation? You want somebody to come in and work with you hands-on on your equipment, helping you improve your efficiency and quality practices? Right here. You need somebody on the books that's just on the books. Literally, his house is built on top of books. David Lentz. He can do the finances for you. So we had a booth, man. I did have a friend from another brewery who is on the marketing side. When we asked her what she thought about our booth, she smiled and she said that it was very functional and she thought that it fit us very well. I think that what she meant to say was maybe it was a little bare bones, you know what I mean? But it was clear things were, everything was symmetrical. This banner that you see behind me right here was the exact half width of the booth, and David's was the exact same layout, black and white, black and white, black and white. You know, we had the things on the table, you know, it is what it is. But David and I were out there making things happen. And were we in Columbus? Was that where I think it was in Columbus? It was my first time ever doing a trade show. And you know, from watching somebody who does a solo 2-hour live stream podcast, that I'm an extrovert. Okay. And it was wild though, you know, after everybody was so great coming up to me, talking beer, talking about how they'd seen my stuff. Just a lot of great conversations, meeting a lot of amazing people, something I was really grateful for. And man, by the time the trade show was done, it was only a single day trade show. I was fried. There was nobody else. You know, I could leave David there, but it wasn't like I was a 2-person team, you know, somebody else representing my brand while I was there. And so you're just there. And then I'm also like a panic peer, not like I panic and then I pee in my pants, but as in panic as, oh, I might not be able to go to the bathroom for a while. How much longer can I stay here? And then you're like, all right, I'm just going to go to the bathroom quick. And then basically no pee comes out. And then you go back out and then you're like, oh, maybe I do. But then you're like, quit being crazy. And maybe it's also because I'm getting older. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. But we did our thing in Columbus and it was a lot of fun. Again, hat tip to everybody that came up and said hi. It really helps to keep me going, man. It was a good thing. Helps to keep your spirits up and help you feel like you're reaching people and helping people with what they love to do. So that was great. Had some great conversations, and actually one of the great conversations led to a podcast appearance next week. And I'm going to have Amy Mast from Craft Leadership on. A couple years ago, I saw her present at OCBA, and I'm not going to lie. Like I've been to, I've seen a lot of leadership stuff in my lifetime, and actually, I read a fair amount of leadership development type stuff and listen to a fair amount of stuff like that. And my experience from the teaching world was presentations like that usually aren't very good, but I got a lot of value out of Amy's. And then we ended up having a great conversation at one of the evening events, the first night of the conference. And just a great conversation and kind of talking about what she does and what I'm moving into. And so I hit her up afterwards, and we're going to do a podcast next week on communication. And, you know, one of the things I like to do with this channel is, you know, obviously we talk about the technical brewing things, but also I'm very passionate about helping people trying to develop their job in this field into a career in this field. And I believe that communication skills are one of the key components to really improving yourself as a professional, even just as an individual, right? So we're going to have some stuff next week with her, some really practical, functional, not usable, but, you know, some tools, baby. Yeah, but fill up the tool belt, son, you know? So that's what we're going to be doing with Amy. So that was cool. That was one of my big takeaways from the conference. So that was good. And then we're turning the page to Indianapolis. Okay? Indianapolis. Earlier this week, my friend sent me a picture of Andrew Luck. And he was kind of looking off to the side. He had a similar type, you know, shorter beard, dark glasses, hat. And it looked vaguely like me. And when I saw the picture that he texted me, I said, hey, where did you get that picture of me? And then it wasn't me. And you could run into me or Andrew Luck at CBC. Okay? That's a possibility. That's a possibility. So if you see me, say what's good. I'm going to be around. I might be hanging out with Blickman a little bit and visiting their booth. Make sure you do that. But I'm definitely going to be roaming the trade show floor, talking to people. I'm going to be passing out cards, baby. Kaboom! You like that? You like both of the? I hope this is a good idea. One QR code has the YouTube channel. The other one has my one pager with the marketing, with the video services, marketing services, and my consultation services. Other side, boom, baby, the grill. Boom, boom. All right. So I'm going to be slinging those cards. I'm going to be wearing a backpack, and I'm probably going to have some dried meat in it. And I'm going to be eating some dried meat because that's how I have to roll these days. A little bit of dried meat. A little bit of chickpea salad that I'll be eating back in the room. I will not, when I go away like that, my dietary restrictions make it a little bit difficult. So I might seem like a little low blood sugar, but still come up and holler at me, baby. Listen, if there's any sugar left in my body, I'll be able to talk to you and I'll be excited about it. Okay. Low blood sugar or not. But I'm going to be in Indy. Let's get it. Let's have a good time. Come up and say, hey, you know, what else? Baby, there is all sorts of new things popping up. We got Ryan in the chat. What up indeed? Ryan's dropping a couple questions. Love it. Keep those questions coming, and we'll get to them here shortly. If one of the things that, let me see what I have written down here. Lots of great stuff. I'm excited about the fact that I'm getting back into the brew house. I have been in at 50 West, Listerman. We got the gang back together at Cartridge. Josh, Maggie, super. Like it's like a super group. Okay. We made some beer. So we have some in-brewery content. Get in there and check it out. Lots of good stuff. And then, hey, you know what? Do you want the scoop? Do you want the real deal? I'm doing a brew day with Ryan Geist next week, baby. The truth. All we're doing is telling truths. I'm going to be doing a full brew day on brewing Truth IPA. Unless I'm talking out of school, and I don't think I am. We're going to have full recipe, full process. The amazing thing about a very large place with Ryan Geist, I'm going to be able to get footage of the brew day itself because they do multiple turns a day of that beer. I'm going to be able to get stuff from the cellar, from the decanter. What? Do you even know what a decanter is? Maybe I don't completely either, but we're going to find out. We're going to maybe get some dry hopping in there, some packaging, top to bottom truth. We're going to get down to it. Okay. So that'll be a unique one because I have not made a brew day with a brewery that big before. So some cool stuff coming up there. So stay tuned. Also, I would love to get some feedback on the increased number of podcasts that I'm doing. Most recently, I spoke to, actually not most recently, but recently I spoke to Dallum and some friends at June Shine. And what was the other brewery? It was June Shine and a brewery from Maine. It will come to me. About CO2 recovery. Super interesting. Get in there and check that one out. Interview with Richard Priest from Escarpment. That was baller. Want more baller? How about Boyd Culver from Cold Break? Everything you wanted to know and maybe more about jockey boxes. Alex Reinhart from Southridge Brewing, a place popping up not too far away from me. John Haggerty, Warped Wing. All right. Let me know how what you're enjoying about those questions that you have about it, things that I might be able to improve as far as that goes. I'm always open to all of that feedback. And speaking of feedback, I don't know if maybe I'm beginning to make it. My Instagram is growing quite a bit. The YouTube channel is still growing, not at the rapid rate that the Instagram is. The Instagram is really growing fast. But I'm starting to get like ridiculous people in the chat room, just like saying the most inflammatory things. Hey, and I'm getting weird comments from people. Some I think have to even be bots because they're not like, all they're using is like newsy buzzwords and the comments don't even make sense. But I'll take it, son. You know, always drop those questions for me. It is much, much appreciated. Also in the chat, we've got Guy Smiley. Guy, welcome. I'm going to dig into your question here in just a little bit. I appreciate that. And again, those of you who are in here live, make sure to drop those questions because I don't have tons and tons today. But let's get into the March Career Corner. I'm learning a lot, man. The last month, I've really been diving in on trying to create as large of a volume of high quality educational content as I can. Part of that has been making every day I have like a funny meme or a meme that I think is funny that goes up on YouTube and as a short and on Instagram. But then there's generally 3 to 4 other videos that post as shorts on both of those platforms, including Facebook. So I'm putting a lot of energy into trying to see how shorts can grow my platforms. What I found is that it's really growing my Instagram. I've gotten probably like 650 subs in the last 30 days on Instagram, which for a smaller account like, smaller, I mean, I've got, is it 5,300 on Instagram right now. And, you know, for a niche, 5,400, baby, just hit it. 54. For a niche creator like me, that's good, but I'm really growing fast. Again, like 650 in the last 30 days, which has been awesome. So that increased posting on those platforms has really helped me. Again, if you follow me on any of those things, it really does help if you like and share them. So please just consider doing that, especially if you don't have the scratch to support me. That's a great way to be able to do it because I do a lot of research on this side of things, on the social media side of things. And from an algorithm standpoint, that's how Instagram is really pushing things, is through the shares. Okay. So whether you're sharing to your story or to the homies, it really, really helps me, and keep liking and everything like that as well. But I'm kind of pacing, like I pace right now for, probably at a minimum, I'm going to get 5 million views on the content that I'm putting on Instagram, which is a lot and valuable. So people out there that are business owners, allied members, different things like that, I have a really unique platform for you to be able to advertise your products. So hit me up on that. I'm going to get another 750,000 views on YouTube. And so let me know, man. I create a lot of video content and I get a lot of eyeballs on it. So that would be maybe something very beneficial for your business. But I feel like I'm trying to build my skills as a podcaster. I heard this joke earlier a couple weeks ago and it blew my mind. It was a Norm Macdonald joke. And I feel as if I've heard a lot of Norm Macdonald jokes, but every once in a while, you get one that you haven't heard before, and I'm going to amend it to fit my situation. For the record, I think this is funny. I feel like podcasters look at me like vampires look at Count Chocula. I think that's funny. I think there is like a little bit of imposter syndrome with somebody who is, so like I'm going to do, 50 I'm going to do a weekly podcast this year. That's a lot of podcasts. And then sometimes I find myself apologizing for my speech patterns or, my filler words and different things that I feel as if make me, less professional. But since this is Career Corner and we're talking about like, career and personal growth, that's really something that I'm working on getting rid of. Podcasts can be a relatively informal medium. And I do want to get better, but also I don't need to be taking shots at myself live on air when I do it. So that's kind of like the last joke, right? The way vampires look at Count Chocula. I think that's hilarious. I think he was talking about actors because somebody called him an actor. Norm, that is. But just really focus on trying to get better at what I'm doing from a content standpoint, so things look and sound better, but also to have high quality content for all of you. So again, whether you are a home brewer, a pro brewer, you are in sales for a company, spread the stuff around, man. It'll really help me keep doing it, because I'm going to crank out a lot of killer content for all of you this year. So what else? I'm working on learning how to listen when I'm doing these interviews, which can be a little bit of a juggle, because you're asking a question, listening to the answer, and then sometimes there's follow-up questions off of what they're saying, but also trying to keep the framework of the conversation moving. So that's something that I'm growing with, and I'm finding that it just takes time and practice. So that's been pretty rewarding. And it is also adjustment for when I'm doing the interview type stuff. When I did the Dallam, the CO2 recovery one, Sebago was the other brewery that was on there. I was interviewing 3 people at once, 4-part screen. And it was the first time I interviewed 3 people at once. And so there's the worry of, all right, how is this going to work from a technology standpoint? Is the audio going to be bad? If 2 people talk at once, is the audio going to dump? There's all those thoughts going through your head, but then also trying to make sure that the different people involved are being able to contribute to the conversation. So anyways, it's been enjoyable. But that's really the career corner stuff. I might add one more thing. I sometimes like to beat myself up as being a work from home person now. 3 days a week, I'm still full-time dad, but some days I'll put in, 12 to 14 hours and crank out tons and tons of work. And that's great, like when that energy is there. But sometimes I beat myself up when the next day I am not as productive. And my wife is helping me understand, because she's amazing, that I need to kind of take the ebb and flow of my natural creative bursts to, be all right with that. So yeah, that's really it. I did do a podcast. I went downtown Cincinnati Business Podcast, and the Cincinnati Podcast Studio. If you are in the area and you have a business, or are just, have your side hustle or whatever, and you want to do a podcast, it's an awesome studio to get it and work with. They have high quality video, audio, editing. They will do it all for you. Very, very cool. They interviewed me for their Cincinnati Business Podcast, and that was a lot of fun. That won't be going up until maybe later this month. But I'll be sharing some of that stuff out there as well. So if you are interested in, like kind of the business side of things that I do, and it focuses particularly on the content creation stuff, you can check that out as well. But other than that, that is the career corner. Let's dip into the chat. We have the great and powerful Ryan from 210 Brewing in the chat. Question: is there a specific pH you like to hit when trying to crisp up a lager? Gosh, Ryan, I think that's a great question. And I hate to do this, and I've gotten some comments on some videos off of the Richard Priest podcast that we did, where sometimes people can get impatient with some questions that are a little bit in the "it depends" range. And unfortunately, well, that's not unfortunately, it's the reality. Sometimes it depends with this. Okay, I will say that I believe that pH is a critical portion of making the crispy boy, as so many of us are chasing these days. What I will say is you want to be making sure that your pH is in the food safe range, 4.5 and below, or maybe it's below 4.5 off the top of my head. I'm forgetting if that hundredth of a point makes the difference or not, what the dividing line is there. But I will say this, I think a really great way to test that out is to get your beer when it is on tap with the carbonation in it and get the pH on that, and then take that and titrate it out into multiple different pints or sample glasses. And so say, for instance, your lager is sitting at 4.4. Adjust it with food grade lactic acid down to 4.3, 4.2, 4.1, 4.39, and then do some sensory on those. I hate to give kind of a cop-out answer, but let's talk briefly about all the different things that are going to go into what makes something crispy, right? So one factor is, I think, that the dryness of a beer, the amount of residual sugar that it has, which is a fermentation mash temperature thing or grist thing, depending on the amount of simple sugar you use, or adjuncts that will go to zero, right? Fully fermentable adjuncts. So the amount of body, the amount of residual sweetness can impact that. If you're introducing grains that are going to increase either residual sweetness or body, that can also affect it as well. Your water profile can too. But I think pH is a great place to start. So if you like your water profile where you're at, if you like your grist and your fermentation approach where it's at, I think pH is a great place to look. And I think titrating something like that out, doing a little bench testing, adjusting things down with lactic acid would be a great way to go. Now, it might be less fun to hear me say, well, I would start with, the base sample, the second one drop of lactic in it, see what it drops it. Okay. Make sure to stir it, make sure it's homogenized, right? And then test. So there's going to be some trial and error. Pick a day where you don't have a ton going on and dig in on this. Okay. That would really be my primary way of testing out what that's going to do as far as helping to make your light beer, whatever beer, more crispy. Okay. But yeah, it is a key component. It is a key component. So Ryan, I appreciate the question on that one. Ryan has another question, and I gotta sip the agua, ladies and gentlemen. I see some more people trickling into the chat. Welcome. Hopefully your Friday is going well. Let me know where you're from. Part of the world, baby. What part of the world? It's always interesting when I think about what time it's going to be, where I know different places people are going to be tuning in from. So anyways, Ryan's next question. We tend to let our beers ferment out until there's no activity or we hit our final gravity. Should we be dumping or blowing down the cone prior to terminal? Well, I think it's a great question. I would reference you back to some stuff that I have discussed in the past about cone shaving, and even in the conversation that I had with Richard Priest. The concept of cone shaving, if you're talking about an ale ferment that's going to take off in 12 hours, is early into fermentation, so past growth phase, gently bleeding out what dead yeast and trub may have settled to the bottom of the cone. That's one element. And so that's not directly getting at what you're discussing here. But what I would do is I would always allow beers to hit terminal. And when I say that, I mean that it is reading at the same gravity, at the same temperature for 2 consecutive days. And then I would look at maybe a soft crash, depending on what you're doing. in order to get some yeast to flock, or a hard crash in order to get the yeast off the bottom of it. That's the way I would approach it. So I would wait. So also let me insert this. I would give 2 days at terminal and then passing a VDK test or a diacetyl test. And the reason that you want to be doing that is that after implementing an appropriate VDK test, any diacetyl that may be present in that beer will be far more readily sensed after going through that forced diacetyl test, okay, or that diacetyl test. In general, what you can do is you can take a sample of the beer with a lid on it or a cover on it. I've done anything from a flask, an Erlenmeyer, a plastic flask, a Nalgene bottle that you can screw the top down on. And then you heat it up, get it soaking in a bath of 180-degree water, 180 F. And I think off the top of my head, that's 85 C, baby. Thank you, Sonder. I think that's one of the few Fahrenheit to metric conversions that I may know off the top of my head. And I might be wrong with that. But anyway, and give it a 15-minute rest at 180 degrees, and then take that out. I know some people chill down again, but in general, I get the top off that and sniff on that right there and taste on that right there. And that'll answer a lot of questions for you. I would also have multiple people do it if you have other people on staff in the brewery. But yeah, once you are 2 days terminal and past diacetyl, I would go ahead and crash that thing down. So say you started crashing it at the end of your work day on Monday. I would come in on Tuesday, assuming that it would be pretty close to all the way crashed, or at least significantly colder. You could start harvesting / getting yeast off the bottom of that tank at that point. That's the way I would do that. And if you're utilizing it for harvesting, I would I would try to have as regular of a treatment of that as possible. When I was at Cartridge, I would always harvest 2 days post crash. Okay, so that I just did 48 hours, and then I would harvest from there. I didn't have a lot as far as lab stuff going on there, so I just tried to keep my processes as consistent as possible. So that's how I would approach that, Ryan. I appreciate the question. And I hope you're doing well, man. Hopefully the wing is doing well. Welcome to everybody that is pouring into the chat. Welcome. Welcome from the bowels of Cincinnati. I don't have a ton of questions today, so if you're tuning in right now, drop those questions in the chat. I do have some prep, but you know. Next question comes from Guy Smiley. Now listen, Guy, I don't know if I've seen you in here before. This name seems new to me, so if I've not seen you before, welcome. Guy says, "Hey, Adam, great content. Thank you. A quick question about carving beer. Could you go through your carb stone, put, say, 13 to 14 PSI of pressure on your tank, and then take a hose from your blow-off arm back to the carb stone and let it carb itself?" So you're talking about essentially creating a loop. Could you go through your carb stone, put, say, 13 to 14 PSI on the tank, and then from your blow-off arm back into the carb stone and let it carb itself? I think you could use less CO2 and you could keep checking until you reach your desired volume. What are your thoughts on this? Well, okay, Guy, and maybe you can give me a little bit more info here. So you're thinking input the gas into the tank, and then so you have the input going in through the carb stone, and then you're talking about going from like the CIP arm of the tank back into the carb stone. So instead, rather dumping it to the atmosphere. That's what I'm assuming you're saying. I'll answer it like this. My preferred way to carb a beer is to get it cold, close to, 32, 33 F, or, close to 0 C, because I prefer to be packaging that beer when it's very cold. Now, for the record, with these off the top of my head conversions, and I know that one is pretty easy. Sometimes I flip-flop them. You have to try to rub my nose in it in the comments. You know who you are, because there's one of you that loves doing that. But what I prefer to do is I prefer to never have gas coming out of my bright tank. Okay. So when I was at Cartridge and I had the time to, which is pretty much always did, rather than utilizing like a bleed and feed approach or a feed and bleed where you're feeding gas in through the stone and then bleeding that additional pressure that you're pushing into the tank out the CIP arm. Rather than doing that, I prefer to have the tank sealed and pressure it up, okay? So a lot of times when I was at Cartridge, I would have, 5 PSI on the fermenter, and it would be all bunged up and ready for transfer. And then I would put, more gas on that tank and then feed it into the bright tank, going a little bit lower than the PSI it was at. And so I would get into the bright tank and I wasn't always all the way up at 10 or 12 PSI where the tank would traditionally be. What I would then do is I would, with the tank closed, so for those bright tanks there at about 33 degrees, if I got 10 PSI into solution into that beer at that temperature, it would give me a carb rate that I was happy with in general. So what I would do is I would take the 10 PSI I wanted and I would add 4 to 5 pounds, because the carb stones I was using had a wetting pressure of 4 to 5 pounds. So that's the amount of pressure you need to put on that stone in order to get the gas to start flowing through it. So what I would do is I would get the beer transferred in. There'd be 5 or 6 PSI in the tank once the transfer was done, because that was essentially the pressure that was on the fermenter. And then I would hook my gas up to the stone and I would set it for the 10 PSI I wanted, plus another 4 or 5 for the wetting pressure. And so, and that was with some trial and error, because I knew the max pressure that would give me in the tank was 10. And I would hook that gas up, and then I would take the little valve that I had on my carb stone, and I would listen. I'd put my ear on the tank, and I would start cracking it very slowly until I heard that backflow preventer that was in it start to go. Just this little whirring sound, which meant I was getting gas through, and then I would just leave it. Now, there really isn't any danger to the tank in that scenario, leaving that gas on like that overnight, because even if it did go up to 15, that tank is rated for 15 anyways. And really, it could probably only get up to 14 with the setup that I was using. But typically, I would get in the morning. It would be at 10 PSI. I would hit it with the old shake weight, the old Zamennagel, and I would have the carb that I wanted. I do understand the idea of wanting to both save CO2, but one reason that I like to prevent some bleed and feed type concepts for carbing is I believe what I just described is potentially a more gentle way of carrying out that carbonation. The more gently we carbonate our beer, the less foam positive proteins are denatured, leading to possibly better foam in that beer downstream. Okay. So that's my take on it. What I do like about it is I do like that you are brainstorming ways of, both conserving a costly raw material and looking at through that lens and trying to problem solve through. That's what we should be doing as brewers. So I think that's awesome, Guy. And if you are first time, long time, welcome. It's good to see you in here. Hey, Senor. Hey, Adam, have you used Kanzerna? I don't know what that is, man. If you can tell me what that is, the answer is probably no, but maybe I've used something by another name. So if you can jump back in and let me know. And Senor, I believe this is the first time I've seen you in the chat. So welcome to you. Okay. What else? Hey, side note, I'm going to look at this real quick. The wife and I are getting away for a couple of nights today. So a message just came through about our Airbnb. And so let me make sure. Yay. Yeah. I'm one of those people that, like, when you get a message about something, you just expect like the worst. Like, I was expecting the host to be like, yeah, hey, listen, the place blew up. You don't have anywhere to go tonight. So, and we're still charging you. So, but that's just my own personal mania. And yeah, Ryan, that's kind of what I'm talking about with that cone shaving type concept. You do want to be very gentle with it, and you would want to do that once the active fermentation is rolling, but just very, very gentle, especially if you feel as if you maybe didn't get a very clean knockout, or you may have gotten a lot of trub in your fermenter, or I know Vinny Chilurza from Russian River has talked about utilizing this practice and then it leading to having less solids in their yeast harvest. So that would be another reason as well, man. Oh, okay. So getting back to Senor, Kernza. Oh, no worries. It's a barley alternative. I brewed with it recently, flaked Kernza. I'm gonna have to dig in on it. You can, if you feel like checking it out. I know there's some different ones floating around now. I know there's Fonio, if I'm pronouncing that right. I do know that Garrett Oliver is a big fan. Garrett Oliver, the man that once broke my heart into a million pieces, but that's for another podcast. Garrett, I don't blame you or your straw hat. I'll never be as well dressed as Garrett. But Fonio, I do know that there are some alternative grains out there, and that's a gluten-free grain. But Kernza, Senor, if you want to drop a little info about it in the chat, I don't know about it, and I'd actually be interested. I will say this too, for those of you out there, if you're listening, well, if you're listening, if anybody's listening, hit me up drop me suggestions for gluten-free beer. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but I was finally like, listen, I'm going to get some legit gluten-free beer. And I grabbed an IPA and a blonde ale from somebody recently, and it was borderline impossible. I had to go to Jungle Jim's here in the Cincinnati area. And I mean, they have a trillion beers, and there was nothing. And I mean, there was two options. I bought one of them, and the beers were really bad. They were phenolic. The IPA utilized maltodextrin, and which isn't a problem in and of itself, but I'm assuming one of the problems is building body with some of those gluten-free grains. But dude, it was so filling. A pint was because it was listed. It was 300. It was 300 calories, and not that I'm like calorie counting, but it just felt heavy. But the ferment on both of the beers, or it was an infection on the packaging side. It was rough, dude. And I wanted so badly to like it because it's a pain not cracking a beer occasionally. This isn't my, me talking about my gluten intolerance. This isn't my support group about it, but it's a bummer. And so I went out of my way. So let me know first of all, who's making decent gluten-free beer and where the heck I can buy it. Goodness gracious. Very difficult. Senor says it's a barley alternative. I brewed it recently. Flaked Kerns. Oh yeah, I already read that. So I know there are some different things out there. It's kind of an interesting topic. I haven't dug much into the Fonio stuff, but apparently you can make incredibly pale beers with it. It's a very subtle grain option. So yeah, there are some interesting things out there. Fresh County ales. Howdy, Adam. It's great to be catching up with you live this evening. This evening, again, blows my mind. Apparently, it's other times in other portions of the world. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us from South Africa. Check South Africa off the list. Okay. I need somebody to get a map of the world, and there's the old Mitch Hedberg thing, where he wants to mark with the pen the place he's traveled, but first he needs to travel to the top two corners of the map so he can attach the map to the wall. But anyway, somebody needs an Adam Makes Beer listener map, baby. And I can actually see it on my analytics. It's crazy. South Africa. Awesome. Hoping you have a kick-ass day ahead. Brother, like I said, I think I am. The wife and I, we're going to sneak out. We're going to go to the movies tonight. We've got like an old person version. We're probably going to do some beer pong, but it won't be like having to it won't be like as much of a drinking game, but just something to do. My wife is adorable. She's one of these people that, like, when she does something awesome when she's playing games, she jumps and claps a little bit because she is unfathomably, unbelievably adorable. She's a sweet girl. So yeah, we're gonna have a fun time. It's gonna be a great chance to talk and reconnect, and yeah, it's gonna be nice. So yeah, I will have a great time. Fresh Country Ales. Good to see you in the chat in South Africa. Love it. Remember to pop into the chat and let me know where you're listening from and to drop some of those questions. But the next question is going to come from King Queso on YouTube. King Queso, man. Well, first of all, we've got a couple of great names. King Queso, yeah. I'm hitting my mic. Couple of great names in the question department today, but King Queso. I just brewed a fest beer with Imperial Global. Shout out Imperial. I mean, that was my go-to when I was at Cartridge, baby. When I was at Cartucho, You should have me in and do a lab behind the scenes. I mean, come on. And then sponsor me. I'm having a strong sulfur smell when I sample the beer. It is currently 2 weeks old and has already had a diacetyl test. I fermented under pressure in a keg, so I think this trapped the sulfur. My current plan is to purge the headspace several times a day for 3 days until the smell goes away. I am unsure if this is a good idea or not. This video, which is referencing the video that I did with Richard Priest from Escarpment, this video suggests that maybe the sulfur will dissipate naturally during lagering. I have also had sulfur issues with Hefeweizen strains that I've used. Most people that drink my beer don't notice or mind, but for me, I hate it when I get even the smallest smell of sulfur. So first of all, King Queso, it's like you're reading my diary on multiple levels. Who loves queso? This guy. Okay, dude, give me some organic corn-based chips. I could just shovel it into my mouth. I am pro queso. All right. But another way in which we're twinning here today, King Queso, is I too have had issues with sulfur and Hefeweizen, and sometimes sulfur in my lager. If you go back and listen to that video with Richard Priest, he discusses how ultimately sulfur is an upstream issue. It's going to be something that happens ultimately on the hot side or cold side, depending on how you're getting your nutrient in there. But it is suggestive of an inappropriate nutrient level for your wort, for your yeast, right? And so that's where the excess amounts of sulfur are coming from. Now, note, some people don't recognize it. Some people recognize it really, really well. Some people are really, really keen to sensing that particular thing, as is with all sensory stuff. So, you know, at the point of the process that you're at, you can't obviously address the nutritional stuff that you did on the hot side. But there are some ways that you can scrub. And I would suggest a little bit of patience, since the beer is finished in the keg, of gassing it up and then degassing that headspace. I'm not sure if 3 days will do it or not. Sulfur tends to be pretty what is the word? Volatile. Tends to be pretty volatile. So it is a way that you can get that out of your beer. If the beer is already clear in the keg, you might be able to be burping it from the bottom too, to pop that CO2 up through it, allowing it to go into the headspace, breathing that off, and then pressuring back up again, or doing it again. That's probably at this point going to be your best bet. You can, as we discussed in that podcast as well, maybe try to transfer it into another vessel that may have some sort of copper in line, but you can also be dealing with oxidizing the beverage as a whole when you do things like that. So my suggestion, practically what to do right now, is the best way is to try to strip it out of that keg, as you suggest, and with some of the tips that I mentioned. But also, you know, fixing it downstream. I would look at adjusting your nutrient practices and potentially increasing your nutrient usage, and doing a bit of a deep dive on that. I would suggest that there's great information on Escarpment's website as far as yeast health and things like that. They have a product called Yeast Lightning, and they might have some paperwork up there, because I know they believe very much in getting good quality information out to brewers. So I would also suggest you checking that out as well, King Queso. And as always, my friend in cheese, brew on. And Wade kind of asks a follow-up. Wade, good to see you in here. Welcome. Lack of nutrient. Can there be too much nutrient? Yes. Yes. And again, I would suggest going back and checking out that podcast and those resources, Wade. If you're not using nutrient at all, I would suggest starting and then seeing what that does for you, and then slowly nudging that up. I wouldn't get too aggressive with it, but again, that's like just the blind approach at, you know, trying to move towards your target. And there might be something a little bit more research-based that you can do. But yeah, I would also look into, do a little digging on cold side zinc additions, even though I'm not certain how much zinc plays a role off the top of my head. It might be some other micronutrients and vitamins. So yeah, yes, but there is a ceiling for too much. One of the areas where people can get hung up a little bit is sometimes people feel as if that yeast nutrient, when they add it on the hot side, a good amount of it can get bound up in the tube. And so, you know, the real scientific answer is actually getting a cold side sample, sterile sample of your wort, and then actually getting it sent into a lab to get it tested, and then working with your nutrient supplier on dialing in those values. So that would be a way that I would look at it, Wade. So I appreciate you chiming in there. I appreciate it. We got I don't know. Can you hear the sirens going by? It's not a war-torn area, although I do like to call it Blanganistan, for the record. I did dip into the Blanchester community page on Facebook. It is a community so bereft with inner strife that there are 3 separate community pages for this small town that I live in, which I think is hilarious. And we have something in this area of Ohio called UDF, which is United Dairy Farmers. And it is a gas station. And you can also get ice cream and malts and things like that there. And like when the new UDF opened in this town, I mean, people were having date night there. It was the real deal. It was a real happening in Blanchester. Okay. So anyway, what was I don't know why I was, I've been reticent to interact in any of these local pages because, you know, I do stuff with, you know, I use this face on my YouTube, you know what I mean? And it's like the work stuff that I do. But somebody posted one night in the Blanchester thing, ban or boycott UDF. And then somebody was like, why? And then the post just blew up. And apparently there's like this mangy stray cat that has been around there that some people feed. And then they've been trying to catch it, but they can't catch it. And then they're like, well, why do we boycott UDF? And then somebody was like, well, I went in to buy food from UDF to give to the cat. And they said I couldn't do that. And then they said that they've been trying to kill the cat. Okay. And there's like 150 posts on this for a very small town within like an hour. Right. So I'm reading it. And it's hilarious. And then like an hour later, somebody posts, I have a stray cat stuck under my deck. Does anybody have any tips? And so I posted under that one, my first post ever in the local Facebook forum. I hear UDF has some ideas of what you can do. And my post got taken down. 2 people laughed at it with an emoji, and then it was gone. Okay. They did not have time for my nonsense on that page. But anyways, you're not here for that, ladies and gentlemen. You're not here for that. You're here for this. Next question is from Frank Gino on YouTube. There was a conversation about the amount of time that you should leave a beer on yeast. When I discussed that with when I did the podcast with Richard Priest from Escarpment. And there are some people that didn't feel as if they got good answers off of that. And so this is a question that comes from that. I agree there was no clean answer to the question. Can you answer the question, how long to leave beer on yeast? I have a Firmzilla, and to minimize oxygen, I try to never open fermentation. However, I notice my beer tastes best when first trying a sample before transferring to keg. I am not sure why pro brewers are frankly weird about answering that question. Also, it would be helpful to describe how a pro brewer with pressure fermentation can replicate the pro brewery. So first, to answer the question about why pro brewers are weird about this, there's multiple possibilities. 1, they don't know the answer. 2, the answer is very complicated. And in the conversation that I had with Richard, he had kind of kicked around some of the different factors. And no, maybe we did not get to a hard and fast answer. One of the reasons this gets difficult is on the pro side, I can do very definitive things that lets me know when that beer is done without opening up the fermenter. And it is a baseline advantage that most professional brewing equipment has on most home brewing equipment. I can take as many samples off of that beer as I want as a pro. I have a sample port on the side of the tank. I can pull a sample off anytime I want. I don't have to worry about oxygenating my beer, contaminating my beer, things like that. You, however, with the Firmzilla, that is not the case. You have to open it up in order to essentially get that sample, right? So that's a complicating factor, because the real answer is this. The real answer is your beer should be at terminal gravity for 2 days with the exact same reading. You should also probably see your pH has leveled out and is starting to creep up a little bit right now. Okay, so those things, and then that beer should pass a diacetyl test. One of the complicating factors beyond the fact of opening a fermenter is also a lot of people on the home side, because they're making such a small amount of liquid, they want to waste as little liquid as possible on samples. Okay, so the real answer is, I'm not sure why pro brewers are frankly so weird about answering that question. How long do you have to do those things? You need 2 consecutive days at the same at terminal gravity, reading the same number, and you should have your pH leveled and then creeping up again. That's generally what you're going to see with the fermentation. But there's some intrinsic problems there, right, that we just mentioned. Now, taking a glance at that Firmzilla, it looks like there is a chamber that can attach to the bottom, an open chamber that you can drop yeast into. I have, and I've seen some folks do this with different reels and things on Instagram. If you want the number one way to ruin that beer is to attach anything to it, a sight glass, a spool of stainless pipe or whatever, attach it to it, have it not be purged with gas, with CO2, and then open it and then glug that amount of CO2 in it, of atmosphere into your beer. That will screw you over every time. And remember, even when I attach valves to a tank, when I'm going to make a transfer on the pro side, I have a butterfly valve on the tank, and I have the butterfly valve of the transfer hose that I'm going to put together. I have to purge that small little gap in there, because if I push that into that tank, that's O2 that's going to be oxidizing beer. But the problem is when you take that to the home side with such a small volume, that little segment of oxygen is going to wreck that beer way more than it is the 120 barrels of beer that I have in a fermenter. I still don't want to do it with the 120 barrels of beer, but it's way more oxygen comparatively that's getting into your fermenter. So that is one area that I would look at. I would really make sure, I would really be doubling down on things like that, connection points, and making sure everything is fully purged. And again, I'm assuming that maybe that's happening, maybe it's not. The flip side is if the oxygenation is coming from somewhere else, and that is going to be the primary difference between quality, potentially between something brewed at home and something brewed with professional type equipment. Not that it's impossible to do it with pro side equipment as well. But yeah, I mean, that's the big one, making sure that your keg is fully purged, everything in it, the dip tube, everything. When I was purging out kegs for transfer, when I was using cornies at home, I would roll the dice and I would put the gas connect on the liquid one. If you push it down too far, it's going to snap on. It's going to be a real pain to get it off. But if you push it down just far enough and run it down that dip tube, you can actually purge through your dip tube, up through your keg, out through the top, baby. Maybe look at extending that purge, doing it at a lower PSI for longer, and that might help you out. But to dig into this notion of describing ways how a pro brewer with pressure fermentation can replicate the pro brewery. Number one is mitigating oxygen ingress with the things I'm talking about. I think that's number one. Number two is making sure that you have healthy, active, viable pitches of yeast going into your beer. Number three, I would be talking about temperature control and making sure that you are appropriately controlling the temperature of that beer. If you are thinking that you're fermenting at 68 degrees F because your room is 68 degrees or 20 C, I think that's another one. Maybe not. Maybe it's close. If you think that your beer is fermenting at that temperature because that's what ambient is, you're going to see an increase, an easy increase of 10 degrees F. What's going on inside your fermenter as opposed to what's going on outside of it. So that's a big deal. And, you know, I would say when I am judging, if I am judging in a homebrew scenario, the number one things I taste are oxidation, poor yeast health. And sometimes it's a cleaning, sanitizing thing, but sometimes you don't even have a chance to get to that point in the beer because the other two things have been so mismanaged. Okay. But yeah, so not King Queso, but Frank Gino on YouTube. That would be my take on it, man. And I hope that finally answers that question for you, or at least explains why you can't be given like a hard and fast answer on it, even though I just tried. Your boy gets thirsty. Peach carbonated water from Kroger, huh? Do you think? Hey, Peg, are you home? Peg? Hi. I'm still doing my thing. Love ya. The wife's home. Next question comes from... I'm just podcasting. I just said hi. I'm podcasting. That's all. Next one comes from another all-time great username, Margarine Taylor Grease on YouTube. I don't feel I got a clear answer here. He sort of just said yes. One of the problems as a home brewer is that most knowledge is handed down and is mostly hearsay or unreliable. How long can I leave a beer on the yeast? Do I really need to ferment an ale for 2 weeks around 20C or 24C? Could I keg after 1 week? Personally, I naturally carbonate in the keg at 24C for 2 weeks, then chill to about 12 to 15C, the proper temperature for a real beer. Well, Margarine, dipping back into some of the stuff that we talked about a minute ago, I would say that you are looking for 2 days at terminal gravity. You should see that pH ticking up a little bit as you go. You should make sure that you are passing a diacetyl test, and then you can go on and do whatever you want on the backside. Like, you know, what you're doing naturally in the keg is fine, all that stuff. I don't have an issue with that. But that would be my take on MTG. Yeah. Next question is from Lassie on YouTube. My family loves Psych, and that made me think of Lassie from Psych. So, yeah. Hey, Adam, what's the problem with using hot water through the jackets? Cheers. We had a question last time about, you know, you have a beer that is in the tank and it's too cold, and it's too cold ambient, and it's pushing down the interior temperature of your fermenter. I actually just had a dear friend hit me up the other day. He was having that. He had a lager drop 10 degrees overnight, 10 degrees F. And he was struggling with it, and we were trying to troubleshoot it. So when I discussed this before, I said that I don't like to mess with the glycol jacket. I don't like to mess by pushing a beer, through the heat exchanger, because you could put hot water through the heat exchanger and run that through. If you have an active ferment going on, you're past the point of the yeast life cycle to where you're going to want to be introducing oxygen. You're going to be staling, right? Oxygen is only wanted for that, ultimately for that growth phase for standard beers. And so my big concern about putting hot water through the jackets is a few things. One, it's a pain. One of the biggest issues I've had with glycol systems over the years is probably working with poorly installed glycol systems. Shout out Bruce. First brewer I worked at, the glycol system actually, the lines actually blew up. The loop actually blew up while I was brewing one time. Insane. It's been a long time, so I mean, names are names. I don't think anybody's gonna be able to track anybody down. I have a feeling he's not listening to educational beer content anymore either. But yeah, I mean, I've had bad luck and worked in some places that had some really junky chiller loops. But one of the problems is, those chiller loops, I don't like to mess around with them. You can get an air bubble, you can get particulate that can mess up a solenoid, an air bubble that's going to mess up flow. It's a real pain, and so few loops are actually built out appropriately to be able to mess around with things, whether they're properly valved or not, or have bleed out spots, whatever. Just isn't a thing more often than not, and it's been a big source of frustration throughout my brewing career. But speaking specifically to this, so to figure out a way to tap into that, to then push water through your jacket, one, it can be a waste of water. It could be a mess. You're screwing with your glycol loop, which I don't like to do in the first place. You can be introducing potentially water that's hotter than you want it to be as you're warming up that tank. Also, water that's coming in. I'm not certain what the PSI rating on your jackets are, but I don't think it's insanely high. And I do know some water sources are coming into buildings at 60 PSI, which I believe is probably going to be higher than the pressure rating of your jacket, of your glycol jacket. So that's another thing. It's just, I don't know. It's just one of those things. And I do understand the gut instinct to try to do anything to help out with that. What my buddy ended up doing was, cleaning, sanitizing, and purging another tank. But he ran the sanitizer at a much warmer temperature than he normally did, like the higher end, and then transferred the beer over. And all I did was gain 1 degree. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's a pickle. It's a pickle, but I don't like messing around with those things. You're making messes, potentially, and maybe your loop is like rigged out for it perfectly, and you could just introduce the water, but it seems like you're going to put a lot of water down the drain. I don't know. There's no clean answer here or ideal answer here. Whether it be on the beer quality, that's always my number one concern, the beer quality side, and things like that. So sometimes you're just better off draining something and then redoing, which is what my buddy ultimately ended up doing. So yeah, I do appreciate the question, though, Lassie. I get dry, ladies and gentlemen. I talking on this thing. Whew. I think I did a transcript one time, and I put it down to Times New Roman 10, no spaced, and I think it was 15. It was 15 pages, right? Single spaced, right? And as a result, I dry out sometimes. If you do have a question, now is going to be your time to get it in, because I have a couple more after this. So jump into that chat. Oh, and maybe just maybe just one, but this is a bit of a deep dive. So if anybody is in here live and has a question, hit me up, and I will actually check my Instagram real quick to see if there's anything in there. I'm not seeing anything. So unless you guys you folks pop off with another one, I think this might be the one that wraps us for today. But this is a good one. And I'd actually like to, I don't know, I would actually, what we need? Hey, UK listeners, I know it's Friday night, baby. What is it, 6:30, 7:30 p.m. over there? You're in the pub, you're having a proper pint. You know what I mean? Ham pulled, you're drinking a bitter right now. You know what you need to do? You need to have somebody out there that has money fly me out. I'll come talk and do a conference thing. I'll come and do a consult, man. We'll be making that beer, but then on the side, we'll do some video stuff. We'll do some cask stuff. But we're going to talk a little bit of cask beer right now. This is not going to be camera certified, capital camera. You know what I mean? For the preservation of cask ale, real ale, and tweed jackets with elbow patches. I'll tell you this. I know I have some loyal listeners and followers in the UK. And here's the deal. Step one, I get out there. I get off the plane. You pick me up. We immediately go out and get me a jacket, tweed jacket, elbow patches. Okay. I just hope you're ready to be, to watch a grown man out there crushing it in that tweed coat. Okay. When you combine this gross accent with that amazing jacket, get out of here, dude. So my advice on this is not camera approved. But, making cask beer is a cool way to serve beer, interesting way to serve beer. It is a interesting way to be able to do a specialty beer. So you have a main ferment, you have one of your standard ferments going on. It's a way that you can cut something off to have like a special tap release. I think it used to be a little bit more prevalent. Maybe it's coming back, who knows? But we're going to dig in on this. I had Brandon on Instagram, a great way to send me questions, by the way. He sent me a reel of a brewer making a cask beer, and he wanted my take on it. Now, I didn't have like any huge issues with what I saw, but I do think it's worth a deep dive. Lewis is in the chat right now. UK listener. Are you a home brewer or a pro brewer? Yeah, and I need to get out there, Lewis. You know what I mean? Back to, would it be the motherland? I mean, ultimately, this is, we're connected, man. You know what I mean? I need to get over there and we can do beer stuff. But we're going to do a little dip into cask beer right now. Oh, Fresh Country had another question. Oh, I'll get to that too. We'll do this after Fresh Country. Great question. I think I haven't read it yet. Cask beer. So just some high level points on cask beer. What you want to be picking a base beer that makes sense, right? So again, put your, culinary hat on and think about things that would be, and this is just from a, making a tasty beer standpoint. Try to be putting things together. If you are doing an adjunct approach with this, think of things that are tasty and work well together. In general, these beers are going to be lower ABV, all right, and not super hopped. But that's just some of the traditional stuff. A lot of times, people use this technique to make adjunct versions of things. It's going to be very important to make sure that your beer has not been filtered or pasteurized. So you are still going to want to have some yeast in solution. So you're not going to want a completely bright beer that's in the bright tank for something like this. If you do want to be I just kicked my camera. If you do want to be having a re-fermentation in the cask, all right? It's going to be really important to be using a density meter to be checking the beer's gravity. And what we're going to talk about today is we're going to be talking about through the lens of not putting a live beer in there, meaning a beer that's still actively fermenting, but putting a beer in that's fully fermented and then adding some sugar back to it. So you are going to want to make sure for this instance that you have a beer at terminal. And again, camera nerds, don't come at me if you don't like the way I'm suggesting do it. This is just one way, baby. Okay? This is just one way. Yes. Make sure the beer is fully crashed, fully done with everything. Also, I would also try to be aware of the amount of CO2 that is already in that beer, because you might not need as much sugar. So, you know, when you add things to this cask, traditionally you would be adding something like isinglass or a fining agent to it. You don't need to. You could just let it settle naturally. You can be adding dry hops or other spices. Sometimes you can bag those things up and put them in there. You're going to be adding a priming sugar of some sort, dextrose, malt extract, potentially even wort. But you're going to want to consult a calculator that will take into account how much gas is in the beer that you're putting in there, and everything like that. And then you can use your preferred sugar source, keeping in mind that you don't want this thing like super sparkly coming out of that, right? As far as the cask itself, one difference with what I saw in the video, he took a clean and sanitized cask, which is great. But I do think it's really important to make sure that that cask has received an appropriate cleaning regimen with caustic, potentially even acid, and then a no-rinse sanitizer. You're obviously going to want to examine it to make sure that, you know, it has its integrity and everything. And, you know, it has that, I believe it's the key bung. That's the one you would hammer the thing into, the spigot, the tap into. Obviously that in place. I always make sure that I clean those things too. So clean and sanitize those when I put those in. One thing that I would differ from the video was when he purged the cask, he took the CO2 source right here at the end of the pen of the CO2 source and just sat it like in the top of, like right on the top lip of the cask, and just kind of blew gas into it. I'm always one that I like to take a length of flexible tubing that I can clean and sanitize, both the inside and outside of it, and drop it all the way into the bottom of that vessel. And then with a slow purge, do it like that. I feel as if you maybe stand a better chance rather than just mixing atmosphere and CO2. Maybe I can get a more complete purge there. There will be some re-fermentation in here still, but I don't think it hurts to do a nice purge like that. You can add any of your finings, priming sugar, and or dry hops before you fill this, using obviously a sanitized filling rig to go in there. Fill the cask almost to the top, leaving minimal headspace, and then hammer that bung in. Again, something that is clean and been sanitized. And then give that, you know, a couple weeks. You can liquefy that, whatever that sugar source is, if you want to, but just make sure you're using your calculator appropriately as you do that stuff. And then you're going to want to store it on the warmer side. I'm fine with room temp, you know, sometimes a little bit cooler, but get that carb up in it and then get it into your cooler, because that will give it a chance to settle. And then if you can, get it into serving position well before you're going to start serving it. Okay. Typically they are served warmer, you know, around maybe 55 degrees F and I could make up a Celsius number right here, but I'm gonna say 14 to 15 C. Does that get me in the mid 50s range? I'm guessing. But yeah, and then tapping and serving and stuff. But really, we're focused on that prep of the cask portion of it. That would be my recommendation on how to handle that. Again, just making sure everything is clean and sanitized. I would purge from the bottom personally with something that I can clean and sanitize both the interior and exterior of. And then just be careful. Make sure you still have yeast solution in your base beer. Give it a nice place to re-ferment, and then get it cold once you have it there. So, anyways, that's my take on it, Brandon. I appreciate the question. Lewis, microbrewery owner, cask beer. Oh, you do cask beer there? That's awesome. Lewis, if you're on Instagram or LinkedIn, send me a message. If you're not already following me on one of those platforms, but send me a message and tell me and say, hey, we talked in the chat today. I'd love to chat with you a little bit. All right. I'm fascinated by that stuff. And you can tell me how terrible my answer was with all that stuff. Because when you are in a situation where you're putting an actively fermenting beer into a cask, it's a whole other animal. Obviously there's some things that would be similar, from a sanitary standpoint, whatever. But yeah, anyways, camera, don't come after me. Lewis, don't hate me for what I just said, but that's my take on that. Next question is from Fresh Country Ales, FCA, baby, out of South Africa. Thanks a ton for the shout out. Come on down and visit this side of the world when you can. I would love that. The wife, Brewer, and I are ready to host both of you. Well, listen, Fresh Country Ales, I've got the passport ready. Okay, I got the passport ready. I have the worst passport picture you've ever seen before in your life. It's terrible. And it's one of those things, like, as you get older, I'm going to turn 48 this year. And sometimes your age just smacks you in the face. Dude, that picture, I sent it to the government. Oh man, I looked at that thing and I'm like, is this what the world's coming to? But anyways, sometimes it seems like a good idea to be completely shaven, and it's not. Do you have to follow any ISO standards in the brewery? What is an ISO standard? Maybe I can Google that real quick. ISO standards are internationally agreed upon guidelines that help organizations improve quality, safety, and efficiency. It stands for the International Organization of Standardization. I would say this. I think most of our stuff is like, we have like a HACCP plan. We have OSHA stuff. We have like, and you can get inspected either by Department of Agriculture or the health department, depending on where you are here in the States. It varies. So we do have regulatory bodies that oversee what we do. And it's one of the reasons why there's multiple reasons to have killer SOPs, multiple reasons. But one of the ones that can kind of get overlooked is, especially for smaller places, if you have a government agency come into your place and they want to know what's going on, if you can drop a binder on them of some really killer standard practices that you have with your tanks that specifically deal with that jive very well with the chemicals that you're using, It's awesome. It's a great tool to have in that way as well. So yeah, I mean, those are kind of our governing institutions around that stuff, fresh country ales. So yeah, that would be the deal. And like I said, my wife would only be, 6 weeks away from an expedited thing. So listen, man, jump in those DMs. Hit me up on Instagram. We can figure out a way to get me out there. We're always looking to travel. So anyways, long story short, folks, that is what I have for you today. It's kind of fun doing a midday one of these because I'm not going to lie, as an extrovert, I am on like a super emotional high when I'm done doing these things, and I can never fall asleep on nights where I do live streams. Yeah. Oh, we have Dante. I run the ISO program at my company, basically just a body that QC checks your SOPs to ensure that your customers have a repeated experience. Yeah. That makes sense. Yep. That makes sense. Yeah. So basically, I appreciate you jumping in on that, Dante. So it's funny doing this at noon today. So anyways, it was great to see everybody in the chat. We are going to have lots of stuff coming up. As always, drop those questions either in the comments on YouTube. And I know sometimes people don't want me to be using their name or anything. If you want to send me a question on Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook, just say, hey, I don't want you to use my name. That's fine. I don't care. I can make up a name for you. I mean, for goodness sakes, there's somebody named Margarine Taylor Grease that sends me questions. So we can come up with a pen name for you. That's no big deal if you want some anonymity. But I really appreciate all the support you guys are giving me. Again, the main ways you can do that, the free ways, are sharing my stuff, liking, sharing, specifically Instagram, sharing that stuff either to your story or to your friends. All that stuff really does help me. Really. It's a big deal. If you do have the means, consider that channel membership. You probably have to get onto your laptop or desktop to find the join button on the Adam Makes Beer YouTube page. That helps me keep the lights on here, baby. And also, if you're somebody out there that might be able to use some services on the consultation side, you want to work with me, hands-on, in your place, boots on the ground, troubleshooting stuff, let me know. Next week, we will have Amy Mast coming on, talking about how to grow your career and personally grow as a person by brushing up those communication skills. We're going to have some awesome stuff coming up on hop creep. More interviews coming. Stay tuned. Follow me on the gram. Once again, I appreciate you all. Really do. And be good to your people. And I will see you next time. Cheers.